Warren Buffett is often typed as an ISTJ, and I thought this was a very good fit for him for a long time. But after looking into him more, I now think he's actually an INTP. I also think that him and his business partner, Charlie Munger, are a good example of an INTP-INTJ duo. So why do people think he's an ISTJ? Well, I think it's because introverted sensing is a very prominent function in his life. This comes across most noticeably in his habits and routines. Almost every day, he has the same 5-minute drive to work, gets his breakfast in the McDonald's drive-thru, and this breakfast never costs more than $3.17. Bear in mind that this is a guy whose net worth is $86 billion. He goes to the same building, to the same office, with the same colleagues, many of which have worked there for 25 years. He also lives in the same house he bought for around $31,000 in 1958. Basically, he's an extreme creature of habit, which is very true for INTPs, and I think is something that might be overlooked. Mentally, INTPs seek eternal variety and exploration, but in their physical life, they're happy to automate lots of that stuff via habit and routine. That third slot, introverted sensing in INTPs, has a huge influence on their life. When you listen to him in interviews, it's clear that over the course of his life, he's developed this logical framework to guide his decisions, often when it comes to investing, of course. These are often crystallized in ways that are extremely concise and easy to understand, which is something that INTPs often aspire to do with complex ideas. It's the combination of TI and SI that has this desire to create logical principles, ones that will stand the test of time and work in as many scenarios as possible. Although every industry or skill is rife with minute details that need to be mastered, lots of things can also be condensed. He has some brilliant quotes that seem obvious when you read them, but would be very hard to think up yourself. For example, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. This is a lovely illustration of how good economic periods can sometimes mask the fact that many businesses and investments are actually on very shaky foundations. Another quote is, "The chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken." I've always loved that quote. I don't think he actually said that quote, but I think he popularized it. And one more, it's nice to have a lot of money, but you don't want to keep it around forever. I prefer buying things. Otherwise, it's a little like saving sex for your old age. Had to throw that one in. In the socionics typing system, there is the concept of the blind spot function. I've mentioned this idea quite a lot in previous videos, so feel free to check those out. INTPs have inferior extroverted feeling, whereas ISTJs and INTJs have blind spot extroverted feeling. The difference between the two is very noticeable. When you compare him to his business partner, Charlie Munger, who is unbelievably blunt, doesn't care if he offends people, gives you his unadulterated thoughts regardless of who you are. And Warren Buffett's wife once said of him, God didn't give him his fair share of humility at birth. Charlie Munger is an extremely strategic thinker and has written a book on all of the logical fallacies, which is kind of the most INTJ book ever. It's basically how everyone is wrong except me. Kind regards, an INTJ. Warren Buffett, on the other hand, is actually rarely offensive, has kind of a charm to him, albeit an eccentric one, has that strange Yoda-like blend of wisdom and weirdness, and is at the same time incredibly wise and insightful, yet oddly childlike. His wife, well, both his first and second wife, looked after him in a day-to-day sense. On one occasion, his wife was ill in bed with the flu. She felt like she was going to throw up, but at the same time, she wasn't going to make it to the bathroom. So she asked him to run to the kitchen and grab a pan. After some loud smashing and clanging and banging in the kitchen, he came back with a colander. To which she obviously said, "Warren, that has holes in it." After another banging, clanging trek to the kitchen, he finally came back with the same colander, but this time on a tray. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is an INTP moment. An ISTJ is rarely going to need to be looked after in that kind of day-to-day maintenance sort of way. INTPs, on the other hand, are often going to need that, or if not need, definitely want someone to take care of that stuff. Buffett would often zone out of conversations during family time, to the point where his children would often talk in sound bites, or try to warn him in advance if a conversation was going to be a long one. INTPs are notoriously susceptible to zoning out in this way by virtue of them being eternal ponderers, being intuitives, and also having extroverted sensing as their blind spot function, which gives them a kind of detachment from their body. I think he's an impressive example of a mature and well-developed INTP. He's obviously acquired a huge amount of knowledge over his life, but what's more impressive is this logical framework and system that he's constructed that has allowed him to be, at times, the richest person in the world and the most successful investor of all time. The money for him is just the way of keeping score. He barely spends any money on himself, his lifestyle, his house, his car, his breakfast. He's quite minimalistic in that sense. He enjoys his creature comforts much more than indulging in extreme luxury, which he could easily do. He's a person who has pledged basically all of his wealth to charity, and he seems to have found that sweet spot for an INTP, where he can, by using his brain power alone, benefit other people in an ethical way, whilst at the same time living by a ruthless and uncompromising logical system. I'm going to link to some documentaries on him in the description below, so feel free to check those out and let me know what you think of him and whether you think he might be a different type in the comments below. Also, please like and subscribe, and if you are a ruthlessly logical but also sometimes ethical INTP, please hit the notification bell as well. After all, you'll only get 2 notifications from me each week. Whilst you're down there in the description, you'll also see our Discord server, our Patreon and website where we type people, and also individual social media links, which you can feel free to follow us on.